Post-traumatic stress it's no joke.
It was called nostalgia.
My life became a tattered mess.
Shell shock and combat fatigue. There have been psychiatric problems since as far back as the Napoleonic Wars.
You don't cure PTSD, but you can recover from the symptoms.
Following soldiers will be awarded the Purple Heart.
Combat is about more than tactics and strategy, manpower and logistics. The battle takes place in a physical location, but it also occurs in the minds and emotions of the soldiers, Marines, sailors, and airmen who are there. In one way or another, the stress of combat affects them all. Every day holds potential dangers for troops patrolling the streets of Iraq. A bullet or an improvised explosive device could be waiting around almost any corner. The continuous stress can take its toll on the body and the mind.
If you ever go to a place that is in conflict, that has soldiers and civilians and other folks that die, that is a stressful event. Being away from your family for extended periods of time, it doesn't matter if you're a soldier or a civilian, being gone for a year is stressful on your family. People grow apart. People have ongoing stressors in their relationships. Those are challenges for anybody. What we're trying to do is recognize those challenges so that we can address them and help soldiers cope with them.
It's important to realize that everyone exposed to a trauma is changed. There is no way to be exposed to a serious traumatic event without it changing your life, the way in which you look at your life and yourself and your family, the way in which you value different aspects of your life.
Dr. Robert Ursano is chairman of the Department of Psychiatry at the Uniformed Services University of Health Sciences, the medical school devoted exclusively to training doctors and nurses for the military. Dr. Ursano is also director of the Center for the Study of Traumatic Stress.
Some people will go through traumatic events and do quite fine. In fact, the vast majority of people do. Some few, however, will suffer psychiatric illness following exposure to serious traumatic events.
It's so traumatic that it's part of your life forever. It's not just a memory, it seems like it was yesterday. I remember the smell, the sound, and seeing my chief. It's hard, but I remember it very well. I know that it was, an attack, but I get angry at the world, like they don't understand me, and I feel like I can't get along with anybody when I get angry.
PFC Brian Daniels' traumatic event, the Humvee he was riding in was hit by an improvised explosive device, severely injuring his leg. Since his return from Iraq, he's been diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. Specialist Jonathan Barreiro also lives with PTSD and daily pain. He fractured his spine during another IED attack. His diagnosis came during a routine hospital evaluation by a nurse.
I would answer her back with a pretty nasty attitude because I didn't want her there. And just her being there annoying me. Everybody, including my family, and just noticed that I had a lot of bad dreams.
PTSD was first identified as a distinct condition in the wake of the Vietnam War.
My life became a tattered mess. In a 10-year span, I had 18 separate jobs. It spiraled down to where I contemplated suicide.
Vietnam vet David Powell served in the 1st Marine Division from 1966 to 1968. His PTSD wasn't diagnosed until the mid-1980s, well after it helped destroy his first marriage and his career in the computer industry. That's when he began to drink heavily.
And so it became more desirable to be on mental vacation or drunk than to be in the here and now.
PTSD wasn't defined as a specific psychological condition until 1980. One reason it took so long to identify the source of David Powell's problems. The key element, the individual has to have experienced or witnessed an event involving death or serious injury and responded with feelings of horror, helplessness, or fear. There are 3 sets of symptoms.
First off, we see what we call intrusive thoughts. Those can be remembering the event when you don't want to. Secondly is what we call hyperarousal. Difficulty sleeping, jumpiness, perhaps jumping at loud sounds, feeling startled. And then the third element is what we call numbing and avoidance, which is where you feel perhaps some of your feelings are deadened, you feel less feelings than you used to feel, and that you often want to stay away from reminders of the event.
Psychiatrists say many people have symptoms temporarily, but they soon disappear. For others, a diagnosis of PTSD can be made only if the symptoms remain or first appear 30 days or more after the traumatic event. But PTSD isn't just a military occupational hazard. Civilian first responders are often afflicted. Many police and firefighters who responded on 9/11 have been diagnosed with PTSD. Natural disasters can be a cause. The condition is common among those whose lives were devastated by Hurricane Katrina.
Did a year in Afghanistan, a year in Iraq, never seen nothing like this.
The same is true for survivors of the massive Indonesian tsunami of December 2004. Serious accidents and violent crimes such as rape can be a trigger. Anything where death or serious injury is witnessed or threatened, generating feelings of fear, helplessness, or horror, normal reactions of normal people to abnormal circumstances. The statistics are sobering. The National Institute of Mental Health estimates that each year 7.7 million American adults have PTSD. It can occur at any age, but the median age for the onset of PTSD is 23, and many never seek help.
There's a stigmatization of mental health illness and issues in the general population that our Army has a tendency to reflect because it is America's Army. And it is a challenge to break through this stigma.
PTSD isn't limited to the Army. It exists in all services and all walks of life. But military or civilian, post-traumatic stress disorder can undermine the quality of life for anyone in its snare. Next, how the military is doing more than ever before to identify and soothe the wounds within. When Recon continues. September 2006, Fort Campbell, Kentucky. Soldiers of the 101st Airborne Division return home, many of them from their second or even third deployment to Iraq. All the services are enduring the stress of multiple deployments.
And as you begin your reintegration, I'd ask you to keep the families of those soldiers that did not make the return trip with us in your thoughts and prayers. We will never forget our fallen comrades.
After the ceremony, reunion, joy and happiness fill the room, but there can also be an uneasiness in the first moments of face-to-face reacquaintance. Veterans of more than one deployment know both sides may have changed during the long separation.
Coming back is just got to slowly work your way back into your family life. You just can't just jump in there and say just the way you left it.
Write your name, your unit.
Fort Campbell has a 7-day transition process called reintegration. Today, on day 4, a thorough medical screening.
And here we have our health readiness team and stations. This is where the soldiers get their health readiness screening done. Every soldier goes through this station. It's mandatory. You just make sure that they don't have any problems before they want to go back out on leave.
Regardless of rank, everyone must go through every station, including a psychological screening. This soldier agreed to be photographed during his interview and is not diagnosed with PTSD or another psychological problem. But soldiers who do have obvious problems, from stress to prescription drug abuse, will be identified right here.
We're talking anything from depression to marital problems to PTSD, any type of anxiety problems, alcohol and drug problems. So by no means does it focus specifically on PTSD.
Are you having any mental health concerns today, sir?
No, ma'am, I'm not.
This is our second deployment. So if you were to look at the numbers that the whole Army is actually reporting, which is about 17 to 19%, we're pretty much getting that same number right now. But it's early, and so we don't know how things are going to change over the next couple of months.
Thank you. Yeah, I want to say, sir, we're glad that you were safe and you returned. Okay?
Reintegration at Fort Campbell mirrors an Army-wide approach to easing soldiers' return to routine base life. A 2006 Army study found 35% of combat veterans sought mental health counseling within a year of returning. A 2004 DoD report found 15 to 17% of veterans from Iraq had symptoms of major depression, anxiety, or PTSD 3 to 6 months after deployment. The number for Afghanistan was just over 11%.
One of the things we've learned is that if we wait about 90 to 180 days and we bring them back, they've been off block leave, we bring them back, a lot more will say, you know, now that the dust is settled, now that I'm home, now that we've had the immediate honeymoon period is over, I've noticed that I'm really having these problems.
When soldiers first come back, they're so glad to be home that the full impact doesn't really quite hit home. And when they get around friends and family and loved ones, they may be the first people to call attention to the fact that there's some symptoms happening. So, certainly one thing I would urge soldiers is to listen to those who love them.
Certainly our message is to reach out to every person who may be having symptoms that are concerned, or emotionally distressed, or really anxious, or serious problems, feeling very depressed, to reach out for that help. We want them to do that.
How many service members have you seen in this type of situation?
Those identified with psychiatric problems in the reintegration screening at Fort Campbell are referred immediately to staff psychiatrists or social workers.
Mostly been sleep disturbance.
Even before I left for Iraq, I was seeing service members that would self-present to our clinic. They understood that they were having some problems and they wanted to be in good shape before they went over. In theater, we were always approached by people. I could be in the chow hall and someone would come up to me and say, "Doc, you mind if I stop by and see you?"
There is much greater high-level support for efforts to maintain the mental health of deployed troops than ever before.
There has never in history been as comprehensive an effort to address those issues by the services with individuals when they return and while they're there.
And I can also tell you we have a very active combat stress program in theater, and we have an assessment team we bring over annually to check on the mental health and how we're doing on that. But something we treat in theater as well.
The Marine 883rd Combat Stress Control Company devised a stress breaker in Camp Ramadi, Iraq. Regular opportunities to play with Alan, a military canine. Combat stress teams composed of psychiatrists, psychologists, and social workers are deployed to both Iraq and Afghanistan. They run clinics, monitor the mental health of units, and provide an outlet for troops to talk about their combat experience.
Don't we all have a need at some point in time to talk to someone, to have someone to be able to look at what we're going through?
Like a normal medical condition, if you break your leg, you got to go have it fixed, right? You got to go to the doctor and get that squared away. It's no different with your mind, and it's just important for people to realize that.
Colonel Charles Engel, head of the Deployment Health Clinical Center at Walter Reed Army Medical Center, says the team's most valuable role may be simply being there for the troops after a stressful incident.
We try to be close to where the soldier is and where the trauma is being experienced so that we can be there in an immediate way to provide assistance, rather than rushing out with medications and psychoanalysis, that we take care of basic needs. We rest them, feed them, give them the chance to talk about what they've been engaged in. I think the earliest strategies are remarkably simple. They're not rocket science.
We pulled through pretty well.
Unit leaders, like First Sergeant Neil McKinley, watch for signs of stress in the troops under them.
And the soldiers during the deployment, look at the soldiers start actually being by itself. loner and real quiet and 1,000-mile stare. So the things you want to look for when a soldier normally talks, they start being real quiet, and that's a sign of some type of stress. You want to identify that.
Chaplains are also depended upon by the mental health professionals because troops may be more willing to talk openly to them.
We tell these soldiers that you experienced abnormal things, and not many Americans experienced what you experienced, saw what you saw, smelled what you've smelled. All of those senses that we take in impact us emotionally, physically. So it's important that we learn how to cope with abnormal things in as normal way as possible.
On return, the Army wants officers and NCOs to be watchful for what the psychiatrists call battle mind.
Just the battle stress or the stress of danger, but just being away and operation tempo and sleeping and all that. You come back here, you're still in that mindset, and you need to kind of basically come down from that, relax, readjust. And that's, for some people it's harder than others.
It certainly is true that people get wired for sound while they're over there, and it takes a little bit of time to get back to a regular sense of how daily things are going to work.
Hypervigilance and some of the other attributes that are good in combat become excess in a peacetime garrison environment.
That's one reason why the Army now requires all soldiers to be brought back and rescreened for psychological problems 90 to 120 days after their return.
Well, I think at the first session, we get the people that are clearly having problems right now. They probably have problems while they were in theater. But what we basically expect to see in the 90 to 120 days is, our soldiers that may have been struggling some but weren't willing to identify themselves as having a true problem, but after the stresses of work, family, their finances kick in, all the things that they've not been dealing with over the last year, we expect to see more people have problems.
We care a great deal about the young men and women that are serving our country. We know that these are trying experiences that they go through.
Following soldiers will be awarded the Purple Heart.
Just ahead, after years of silence, denial, and suppression, open talk about the wounds within. When Recon continues.
It feels slow motion to me.
Former Marine David Powell still vividly recalls the 1967 incident outside Da Nang, Vietnam, when he was wounded.
I saw the track of a bullet pass through the flak jacket of the fellow in front of me, and it was as though someone was pulling a thread. And the velocity of a bullet isn't such that you can ordinarily see it. But the slow motion experience of mine allowed me to see that.
David was awarded the Purple Heart. His wounding was one of several traumatic episodes in his Vietnam experience.
The recall is vivid beyond imagination.
PFC Brian Daniels also has vivid memories of a much more recent combat mission. A patrol in November 2005 in Iraq.
You fall asleep with the TV on, CNN, you hope you don't, because they show an explosion or a gunfight or something, and that'll trigger, nightmares and flashbacks. But it's also sitting on a red light if you just have time to think. So it can cause you to just, become upset, like you're just finding out again.
The memories resonate across the years and wars. Let There Be Light, a documentary made for the Army by legendary Hollywood director John Huston, depicts the treatment of World War II vets for what are called neuropsychiatric injuries. The soldiers' interviews with psychiatrists could almost come from veterans of today's conflicts.
The sudden noises bother you particularly?
I could just shake a little bit, not that bad.
Well, I guess I just got tired of living, you can put it that way. I had trouble sleeping, yes. Had dreaming of combat, you know.
I just took off because I seen too much of my buddies gone, and I figured the next one was for me. A man can just stand so much up there, see.
There have been psychiatric problems following exposure to trauma, we know, since as far back as the Napoleonic Wars in which they were recorded. During the Civil War, it was called nostalgia. Following World War I, it was called shell shock. In World War II, it was called combat fatigue. There has always been a name, but not as much focus as there is now in trying to understand and intervene.
I felt as dangerous as a civilian as it was dangerous to be in combat.
That focus first began to sharpen with the discharge of hundreds of thousands of Vietnam vets like David Powell in the 1970s.
There was no training, there was no decompression. You were, in 1 minute, a combat veteran trying to save your own life. And the next minute you were a civilian getting off an airplane.
Current treatment for PTSD has two main components: psychotherapy and psychoactive drugs.
We've got, I think, a bigger, more capable menu of options for therapy, diagnosis and therapy than we've had before. And I think it's become something in the nation's conscience that we're concerned with. The nation's concerned about the mental health of their soldiers, as are we.
The most common form of psychiatric treatment is called cognitive behavioral therapy, often in the form of individual sessions with a psychiatrist or social worker.
The one-on-one counseling is really easiest if you're having a really, really bad day, because you don't really feel like you have to share it with the whole world.
But that approach doesn't work for everyone. Specialist Jonathan Barreiro says he responds better to the group sessions run at the Fisher House at Fort Campbell.
I really wanted to talk to other people that have been through the same thing that I've been through. But I wasn't really too interested about listening to somebody talk that have never experienced that.
A therapy called traumatic incident reduction worked for David Powell. It's allowed him to feel comfortable enough with his PTSD to write a book about his Vietnam experience, his decline and recovery afterwards. Now he often lectures in public on post-traumatic stress.
The traumatic episodes that I had recorded in my slow motion experiences seemed to resolve themselves, and I found a place to put them in my mind that was a healthy place rather than a disturbed place.
Following soldiers will be awarded the Purple Heart.
No one knows quite why some people get PTSD from a traumatic event and others don't. Staff Sergeant Josh Forbes doesn't have it, even though he was in a Black Hawk collision over Mosul, Iraq in 2003, which killed all 17 members of his platoon.
Big loud boom. And that's pretty much all I ever remember. I don't have nightmares, I don't have dreams.
He suffered extensive burns to his head, face, and arm, and spent months at Brooke Army Medical Center in Texas. He's had 12 surgeries. It was another burn victim who encouraged him to come to terms with his disfigurement.
Another guy, J.R. Martinez, who was burned about 6 months before me, came into my room one day and he was like, "Hey, you know what? I am who I am. You know, there really ain't nothing else I can do about it. You know, we are who we are." And that day, you know, I looked in the mirror for the first time, and I seen me. It distorted me, but I still seen me.
Sergeant Forbes became an ardent supporter of injured service members. He recognizes the wounds within can be as disfiguring as the wounds without.
I told Barreiro and Daniels, I mean, I make a joke out of it, but, you know, the first thing I told him, you know, one of the first things I told him was, "Hey, welcome to the club. You know, I got a Purple Heart now. You guys got a Purple Heart too." I don't know if it's a club that everybody wants to be a member of.
The first way that we go about diagnosing post-traumatic stress disorder is ask whether, you know, a trauma has occurred. And certainly in the Iraq War veterans, we're seeing that, you know, better than 19 out of 20 soldiers have really met that criteria, that they've seen trauma that is potentially important to their mental health, their long-term mental health.
Tom Berger was a Marine in Khe Sanh, Vietnam. He's now head of the Vietnam Veterans Association PTSD and Substance Abuse Committee.
I went off to war and I came back changed. And it's with me every day. There's some time that I think about it during the course of the day. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. Sometimes I use it to motivate myself to move on to what I have to do next in the day. Sometimes I have to shut down and just be by myself because it's just too much.
If you have surgery, you can close where the operation occurred, but there's still scar tissue. The same is true in my way of thinking about emotional pain and suffering. It heals, but it's still scarred.
For today's service members, there's major concern about the perceived stigma of seeking the help of a psychiatrist.
It's those young soldiers in the middle that I worry the most about because they're still in the formative stages of leadership. They're taking on the mantle of responsibility and accountability for themselves and their soldiers. And the last thing they want to do is to have any appearance that they're incapable or in some other way weak.
One old Marine counsels against the mistakes of the Vietnam generation.
Don't do what I did. Don't seek your solace in Johnny Walker or drugs or those kinds of things. Get some help.
One very young soldier with PTSD feels no stigma over getting psychiatric counseling.
Post-traumatic stress it's no joke. It changes everything. It makes life sometimes just less bright, less fun. But that's why you need to get help, because it can change. It can really keep you down.
If you need help or know someone who does, there are now many resources. For example, the clinic and chaplains where you're stationed, or you can make a confidential call to the DoD helpline. Visit PentagonChannel.mil for that phone number and links to other organizations that can help with the wounds within. I'm Master Sergeant Daniela Marcus, and this has been Recon.